Hello, and welcome to this on-demand session from Artlogic Connect, which took place in September 2025. We're so glad you're here. This year's conference welcomed over 4,200 people from across the globe, making Connect one of the largest online gatherings in the art world, a space where our community shared ideas, explored new perspectives, and imagined what's next for the market, a positive, opportunity-filled future. Artlogic is proud to host Connect as part of our mission to support the arts community and help every corner of the art ecosystem thrive. We're delighted to share this session with you so you can revisit the insights, the conversations shaping today's art world, all at your own pace. Thank you for joining us, and let's get started.
Thank you so much, John, and thank you to Artlogic for having us. I am delighted to be in conversation today with Esther Kim Varet, who I think it's fair to say is the only art dealer in the world running for Congress right now. Esther's gallery, Various Small Fires, began in 2012 as a project space in her living room in Venice Beach, California. And since then, it has expanded to Orange County, and in 2026, it will relocate its flagship Hollywood location to Koreatown. Today, we are going to explore how Esther is balancing two pretty all-consuming jobs. One, running a gallery, and two, running a campaign for the Democratic candidacy in California's 40th district. Thank you, Esther.
Thank you so much for having me, guys.
So I want to start at the beginning of this second chapter for you. Can you tell us when and why you decided to run for Congress?
Sure. So I can say this because y'all are in the art world, and I think people in the art world tend to be more political, right? We gravitate towards it because we value freedom of speech, we value different perspectives, and we value pushing different narratives into the mainstream that haven't been there before. So, a lot of people in the political world or outside of the art world are like, what does art have, what's an art dealer doing running for Congress? And I'm just kind of like, do you even know what the art world stands for or what we say we stand for? And I have always built a program that is very much centered around the most vital concerns of my generation and what I believe will be the concerns of the generations that come after me, which is the ecological impact that humans are having on the world, more equity for women and marginalized cultures and societies. And I went knocking on doors for Kamala Harris in November because I was keeping up with what was happening and naturally. And I came back after 5 days in Michigan knocking on doors, really convinced that I don't know if we're allowed to cuss on this, but like that America's screwed.
I think it's fine.
Convinced that I came back and I told my family, I was like, you guys, I know we have the Kamala posters up everywhere, and we were trying to do stuff at the gallery, encouraging people to go out and vote. I was like, we are going to lose so badly, because I went and knocking on doors talking to Black women that were voting for Trump because of the pro-life issue, Orthodox Jews that were voting for Trump, Lebanese Muslims that were voting for Trump because they were convinced that Biden was responsible for Israel bombing Lebanon. It was just so insane, the kind of bubble that I felt like I was in, that after the election, I felt that kind of really gross pit of despair in my stomach that we felt in the first Trump administration. And I was just like, within 48 hours, I was like, hell no, I can't feel like this for 4 years. Like, if there's a time to do something, it's now. And the only way that we can put some brakes halfway through this Trump administration is if the Democrats win back the House. And out of 400 and something seats across the country, I realized the Democrats were in the minority by only 3 seats. Okay. And the elections for the midterms in America happens every 2 years. So I was like, the only thing we need to be focused on is flipping 3 seats, not that many seats, and retaining the ones that we have. And we can put some brakes on this Trump administration. And I was like, that's simple enough. I was like, I'm going to go flip a seat. So that's what I decided to do.
You can flip a seat or try to flip a seat by giving money, by hosting fundraisers. Like there's a lot you can do short of running yourself. So explain to us how you got from I want to flip a seat to it's this district and it's me.
Okay, so a lot of it kind of fell on my lap because first of all, I was like, okay, I feel like I've done a lot of hard things in my life where I maybe wasn't supposed to do them. I didn't know a lot of, you know, second generation, I'm the daughter of North Korean refugees. Let's just start there, right? North Korean refugees. My parents came to America with $400 and started a shiitake mushroom farm in Texas that went to bankruptcy by the time I was in kindergarten. And they started all over again as janitors in America because they couldn't speak the language. And the fact that despite what people told me that I could or couldn't do in my life, I was like, I came to this place where I was running multiple galleries, was like making a world for myself. I was like, how hard can it be to run for Congress? I've heard a lot of Congress people speak. They're not the most intelligent people out there. And most of them are lawyers. And I feel like the reason why we're convinced that Congress people don't listen to them or hear them is because they're not communicators. They're not connecting with people. And I was like, okay, well, I know I've worked enough art fairs. Like I can connect with people. And I Googled how to run for Congress because I was like, how hard can it be? And
See, that's you Googled.
I started Googling. And I am a millennial. I am not a chat GPTer. Like somebody was like, you should have asked. I was like, I don't know if that would have even helped. And and then the second question I asked was, what do Congress people do all day? Like I know that they go to session and propose bills and pass, but what does the majority of the day consist of? And I realized it was fundraising. And once I realized it was fundraising and your viability as a political candidate in America, as sad as this sounds, depends on your ability to raise money, I was like, I got this. What does an art dealer have but not a Rolodex of multimillionaires and billionaires that are left-leaning and philanthropic? I was like, I have a secret weapon.
And so, that's what you need to get elected, right? You need to raise money to get elected. But talk to us about where you see the overlap between the day-to-day work of governing and being a congressperson and the work and the skills that you've developed as an art historian and an art dealer. Because as you say, the values are aligned, but what about the actual stuff that you're doing?
So for me, what I noticed is that a lot of Congress people run on the platform of being a small business owner. Okay. Because it's very appealing to other people that you understand economics on a local level. You might have employed people and other things nonprofit, blah, 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 founder or whatever. And I started digging around and looking into these candidates, and I realized they actually weren't small business owners. They were they had an Etsy page, you know what I mean? Or they they started a nonprofit which like raised $0 and was like something, it was just paperwork that they filed. And I was like, there are so many fakers out there that say that they have done something. I was like, no wonder they can't deliver once they're there because they're fake people that are literally trying to grift off of fake experience. And I saw this over and over and over again with so many different political candidates. And it is pretty astonishing. And so for me to be like, well, I'm a real small business owner, like I have illustrated that over and over again. I employ real people in their 20s and 30s, and I wrestle with myself almost every day about their pay, about my overhead. I understand how tariffs impact small businesses and how it could wipe a small business out in a matter of weeks with a sloppy tariff. And I'm a mom. I know fundamentally like all the things that go into worrying about my children's future. And what I realized is that historically, Congress was not designed for career politicians. It was designed for people representatives to come in with life experience and vote in ways that align with the public that they represent. And the problem with having career politicians and lawyers run for Congress continuously is that anybody that knows a lawyer or has ever tried to be a lawyer or like, you know, that they specialize in a tiny little sector of the law. And they're some of the most parochial people out there. And they go into law firms that are like bureaucratic law firms, and they're not to knock on lawyers, but they're not really part of the regular fabric of like most people's lives and what they do. They're administrators. And I feel like, great, you be a trusted estates lawyer and try to go vote on my social security or the environment. It actually doesn't add up to like why you would be able to know more about those things than I would. And the other, I've sat on a lot of nonprofit boards over the years. I've chaired a lot of events where it was raising money for different causes, most of the time related to the art world. I understand on, I would say, like more than the average politician, how managing a multi-million dollar budget in a nonprofit works. I understand more than the average politician the worries of creating 401k plans for employees and the burden of having to provide health insurance for your employees because the state does not support or cover them, nor are wages high enough where they can afford it themselves. Like these are real day-to-day problems that everybody is struggling with that I lived through and that I have tried to problem solve for over and over again. And this is by far more life experience than I would say 80% of the people in Congress.
And I'm not going to get us too deep into policy because we have such an international audience, but I can't resist a little bit of policy question. And I'm curious about sort of how your experience as an art dealer has informed your stance on specific issues. One, you mentioned tariffs, another supporting small businesses, DEI. I mean, these are things where I think the overlap is pretty clear. And so I'm curious if you can draw those connections for us and explain how your positions reflect the experience.
So about last summer, there was a headline that really caught my attention in America. And it was Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, cutting all of 2025's fiscal budget, like federal budget. I think it was around $40 million for the arts in his state. He just eliminated it. He declared that it was part of his war on woke. Okay. Since then, the Republicans have weaponized the art world as part of their war on woke. We see this with the censorship that's happening with Trump and the Smithsonian, the John F. Kennedy centers, I talked to board members on different museums across our nation. People have silently taken DEI policies out of their charters, off their websites. Nonprofit people have also done the same because we are afraid. And also, the government now is in a position, the Trump administration is in a position to torture nonprofits and try to take away their status based on these biases of DEI. There is nobody in Congress that is there advocating for the arts right now in any sophisticated way. There is nobody. We are so critically in danger of losing so much in this country. It is not just about the art market, it is about cultural identity. It is about having platforms that respect other voices and having places where multiple histories of America are remembered for the next generation.
And I've been surprised by how quiet the art world has been, especially compared to, Trump's last term when,
Yeah.
the Muslim ban happened. MoMA immediately organized this gallery full of work by Muslim majority artists from Muslim majority countries. It's unimaginable that something like that would happen today. And I'm curious how your move has been received by the art world when the art world has been, to me, quite surprisingly super silent and compliant.
Yeah, not wrong in that assessment. You are absolutely on the nose in that assessment. Um, I will say, for better or for worse, um, I think I have a couple of thoughts related to this because I have been working with a lot of different members of the art world to fundraise. I will say people in the art world have the thinnest skin. So, and it's really interesting because it's easy to aestheticize politics and make a quick buck off of it. It's really hard to embody your politics. Okay. And I have found over and over again a cowardice, especially amongst other gallery owners, in doing the right thing. They are more than happy to show Black artists, Asian American artists, because it's trendy and make a quick buck around it. But when it's really time to stand up for those values, they're freaking cowards. It's because they are, at the end of the day, small business owners, and they actually don't. There is a level of cynicism that I feel like has taken over the art world. And I don't mean to be too harsh, but I will say it is a generation of people in the art world that have not experienced real hardship, but they have aestheticized hardship for a long time. And there's a big gap in that. And right now, I am really what I say, because I'm traveling into so many different cities fundraising. And I will say, and I have now over 18,000 people that have donated to my campaign across the country. I am convinced that it is not going to be the art world that saves the art world. It is going to be another patriotic force. A patriotic force that is dead set on not giving up their chance to have a voice. There might be a small faction in the art world that will go into this category, but that's only going to be like 3 to 5% of people that actually stand up. But that's true across every industry. I don't think the art world is special in the same way that I thought it was a year ago.
Say more about that.
I think there's a real problem when individuals cannot think, say, and do who they are. The art world is very good about thinking and saying, but really bad about doing. And that goes from artists to dealers to collectors. It encompasses the entire ecosystem. Because for so long, it was enough to just think and say. And now it's the time to do. And you watch, and like you said, there aren't very many people that understand that it's time to do and that can implement a do. And so what I've been doing is going around the country and being like, listen, don't despair. We have to do a very surgical action, which is to flip vulnerable seats across the country. Yeah.
So at the same time that you've been doing this, fundraising, traveling around the country, you've also been running your own business.
Yes.
And doing those things at the same time. And I have a couple questions about sort of how those two things have related to each other. And
Sure.
First, I want to ask about, the decision to move and open a gallery in California's 40th district. Can you talk about in what ways that was informed by the art business, in what ways that was informed by the campaign, and how that happened?
Yeah. So VSF has always gone towards blue waters, right? Like I'm not somebody that opens in a saturated market. I was living in New York before I moved to LA. That was 14 years ago when the art world, I remember moving, like people in New York threw me a going away party and they were like, why are you moving to LA? There's no culture there, blah, blah, blah. Everybody loved to hate on LA. And I arrived and it was true. It was the skeleton version of what it is today or what it became. And it was very basic. Um, and in a lot of ways, LA at that time was still struggling and working through an inferiority complex with New York. And I opened there because as you mentioned, I spent 12 years doing a doctorate at Columbia in art history. So I was a modernist. So I specialized in everything after 1880 into the contemporary era. And I spent several years TAing and teaching freshman kids Humanities 101. And I ended up specializing in a program that happened at LACMA in the late 60s called Art and Technology, which basically brokered almost 100 relationships between contemporary artists at that time and corporations for residencies. And I started kind of exploring the different artists that were making up the scene internationally in the 60s. And I realized because this program happened in Los Angeles, there was a huge chunk um, of a kind of West Coast story that was not told by um, I was Rosalind Krauss's person. Like every year they bring in 2 PhD students to be the understudy, for your doctorate. And I started off as Rosalind's person with Tina Rivers. She was the other one who is now the head of Art Forum. And so Tina and I started the same year. And I realized the history that we were not only learning, but also teaching on the East Coast had left out largely the West Coast history. And I was like, well, this is ridiculous because I came to LA and I was like, LA is really one of the original multicultural cities in America, right? Like you have huge Asian American populations, you have huge Latino populations, you have these populations that have intermingled for the better part of the formation of the city. And I was like, it's interesting that uh I was like, we need more we need more representation of what's happening here because clearly this is going to be significant down the line, this kind of acknowledgement. And so opening in LA was like such a kind of novel thing at that time. And people were like, wow, and so I think VSF is kind of considered part of the early gallery movement in LA, because of the timing. And then I did the same. I opened in Seoul because I am fluent. I speak 5 languages. So, like, I'm fluent in Korean. I grew up going to Korea a lot. And I was like, you know what? There's something happening in the art world in Korea. I'm going to open up a space there. So many people in the beginning asked me, why Korea? And then I was like, just wait and see. It's like all the infrastructure is there. It's ready to happen. And I did the same with Dallas because I was like, and I was born and raised in Dallas. So that made a lot of sense. And then Orange County, very similarly, is its own separate pocket of culture and wealth. And I just realized maybe in a time when everybody else, every other gallerist is banging their head against the wall, being like, where are the next collectors going to come from? Because we're in a slump. I was like, I'm going to go where blue waters are, where there's a lot of wealth, but not a lot of penetration by people in our market. So that's what I did. It made a lot of sense.
And by blue, do you mean like untapped or do you mean democratic?
Yeah. Untapped.
And I mean, it seems like you've sort of doubled down on California and centralized your operations. Are Seoul and Dallas still operational?
No. So I have people there in those cities, but I program all of the spaces. I was going to an opening every 2 weeks. We were having an opening every 2 weeks. And I realized I couldn't keep that up, nor did it make sense in an environment where the art world was contracting. And those are the easiest. I mean, I could read the signs for Korea like 2 years ago.
Can you say more about that?
Yeah. I mean, I had boots on, my team was largely made up of directors from chaebol families, very wealthy families. So, one of my directors was the daughter of the LG chairman, art collector herself. Now I was able to track through them the different shifts that were happening in the mentality of the people that had the most money in the country. And then I realized while I was running, we were very early.
Yeah.
We did a lot of business in Korea and in Asia in general. But I realized it was 95% of it was a speculative crowd. And I think a lot of dealers started noticing a couple years ago that this couldn't last. It was like a Ponzi scheme. And I started making changes to the gallery structure in Soul, I slowed, not even 2 years. I mean, but like I instead of doing 7 shows, we did 5 shows. I started slowing it down. Also because the cost of shipping was
Mhm.
becoming at the same time exorbitantly expensive. There was some macroeconomics going on with the way that we could do business, um, that was impacting also our bottom line because if you're working with a speculative market, it is it's interesting. You're always, I mean, I work with mostly emerging artists, and so I don't start with like a $200,000 painting. I start with a $2,000 painting that I mark up to 12 or 18. And um and so the margins for me were always pretty thin shipping the
Right.
works
Right. How much
because
would it cost to ship something that was then you sold for 18K?
I would say like it would eat up probably 5 to 6,000 for that piece to ship, which like if you split that, it's like 18 after discount, half of it, it's just like um but and so the key was to try to do volume. And it was, but I could tell, I mean, I could tell by the different conversations that were happening even politically on the ground, with different election cycles. The ultra wealthy um would be afraid at different moments of the political cycle to buy a lot of artworks because they wanted to continue going under the radar. Um, and uh, I mean, even things like Freeze last year, um, we participated in, and we had sold a number of works to Korean collectors, and then like the freaking president declared martial law, and then the won plummeted, like the one crashed, and like all of the collectors were like, I can't pay. And it was like it's just like, and that was right after Freeze, like when we were still collecting payments. And I was like, this is so unstable because the government felt very unstable.
Mm.
And we all know what happens when a government feels unstable. People stop spending. And this is exactly what's happening in America. But Korea was experiencing this like 2 years ago.
Mm.
And the trajectory. And of course, because I had a team on the ground, I could make these more kind of circumspect observations about how it's going to impact how it's impacting buying patterns. And because I was on the ground and my directors were doing collection visits, they were seeing the kinds of collections that were being built in Korea during this period, and they were very much speculative collections. And so we made, I started making moves earlier than most. And but my style has always been about looking where the opening is, not only for something like our gallery and the artists that we want to put there and promote there, but it's very similar, tying it back to this kind of particular historical moment of when politics needs like a common sense person from the arts, which has come to now represent not something what people feared when I first entered. They were like, oh, people are going to think you're like, an elitist and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm sure they're going to paint me as that. But I was like, but I know that they're going to start attacking institutions. And the
Mhm.
conversation is going to be about freedom of speech. And what I am now representing is a voice of um, an industry that has prided itself and built itself on the infrastructure of free speech.
Do
And
you
yeah,
do you think that there has been this, as you talked about, this like woke backlash that we're seeing. Do you think that in that way, your association with contemporary art could be used as a negative? That it could paint you as like a, woke warrior, which I don't know how that would land in your district.
I mean, they're gonna paint me that anyway because of the way I look, right? Like I can't like escape the way I look and that I'm the daughter of immigrants, right? So it's like, and in a lot of ways, they're not wrong to be mad at that. Like I remember a year ago, I was like, and I said this to my team in a Zoom meeting, with Koreans on there. And I was like, and they always ask about Trump and blah, blah, blah. They have a different, it's interesting because when you have people on your gallery team that are like looking at America from the outside and being like, what's happened? What's fascinating is that I realized, because I said, yeah, the art world is not inclusive, is not all inclusive. I think we should be the first to admit that. I realized that I was not showing Trump artists, for example. Like, I mean, it's something to think about, right? Because it's like,
Are there Trump artists that
I don't know. I don't know. But that's half the country, or like not half the country, but it's like a big chunk of the country. There must be artists there, right? Like, we have not done a lot of work of late on exploring the narratives of the disenfranchised in that sector and elevating their voices. And so I think their accusation is fair to a certain extent, right? And I think, Julia, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this because you're a writer, you cover all parts of the art industry. But like, how can you name a single artist that represents that experience in our world?
I mean, the first one that comes to mind is Buck Ellison, but who's a photographer who is sort of like chronicles white America, middle America, but also, wealth in middle America. But yeah, it's a very siloed community. And so, I mean, that's part of why I was wondering, like, how do you think that this experience running for office, even if you don't win, will inform your approach to art dealing in the future? Like, are there going to be artists or places that you're looking for artists or clients that you wouldn't have before?
No. I mean, no. I mean, my question was really a rhetorical one. I mean, for me, I think there's it's clearly like
I can think of
I want
one.
to surround, huh?
I can think of one.
Yeah, I mean, I want to surround myself with tolerant people, right? Like and I don't care if you're like black, brown, or Asian or white, like, but if you're a bigot, like, I'm not going to work with you. And I feel like so much of what MAGA represents is bigotry and like and hatred of the other that I I don't care to work with you, but prove me wrong. If there is somebody that is like genuine about their experiences and wanting to share that in a kind of generous way with others, then I'm all for it. And if it happens to be about the MAGA experience and a genuine
Well,
empathy.
but also, I'm sure that there are plenty of people who buy art from you who voted for Trump, even if we don't know for sure. I mean, that's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
the numbers suggest that that must be the case.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, yeah, it is true. And they've certainly, I'm sure, have been more hesitant. But, I will say, like, let's talk about the elephant in the room. I mean, October 7th, I feel like the art world started really hemorrhaging, um, hemorrhaging kind of enthusiasm and tolerance of each other, um, starting
Yeah.
from there.
Well, and I wondered about how, I mean, you've taken a very public pro-Israel position in your
Yeah,
campaign.
yeah,
And I did wonder if that had an effect on your business, especially because there are a lot of artists who are,
yeah,
very much pro-Palestine and have
yeah,
been quite vocal about that.
yeah. I have always found it incredibly troubling because I come from um, an art historical background. Terms like colonization, all of those things have very specific anchors in our in history. And I have been very troubled by the misuse and misappropriation often of these terms. But with that said, I am not necessarily I am for Israel's right to exist, just as I am for Palestine's right to exist. I am not somebody that is, and this is informed because I have been, um, after October 7th, been very supportive with my husband, who's Jewish, of the Israeli Children's Fund. So there are about 425 children that were orphaned by October 7th and do not have parents anymore. And they have different pockets of these kids have been staying at my home in LA. Um, I was just with a woman, Sabine, yesterday, who lost her husband and 17-year-old son on October 7th, and her 8-year-old son lost his eye. Um, and so, what I have been an advocate for is seeing pain on both sides. And if that level of empathy for the other side makes me a villain to somebody that is very strongly pro-Palestinian, I would say shame on them.
Has it caused issues with any of your artists?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I find it the most troubling when allyship goes only one way. um, and where it's really challenging because, say, you're Native American and you're like, well, it's like my history. And you're asking them to see the pain on both sides of this. And I very clearly have asked people to be like, listen, there's a girl, Adi. She's 6 years old. She lost both her parents. Here's a picture of me and her. I hosted her at my house. Um, you can't say that she deserves that on October 7th because she's a colonizer. Like, you have to have more humanity than that. And I found a lot of people lack the capacity to hold pain on both sides on this
Have
issue.
artists left the gallery or collectors stopped working with you?
Collectors have, well, no, not necessarily collectors or artists, but it has caused friction. And I will say I have lost one particular relationship over this issue. Um, and it was quite disappointing to me because they again refuse to acknowledge the pain of others because they felt so strongly about this issue. And my number one problem with any extremist sentiment on both the pro-Israel and the pro-Palestinian side is their unwillingness to understand that this Middle East issue is now throwing American democracy under the bus. if you did not vote for Kamala Harris in the last cycle because you were in disagreement about her position with Israel, then shame on you. Trump is part of your problem, and you made this problem happen. You are a part of it. We could have won the election by the people that didn't vote, that did vote in the past, but that took a stand because they couldn't decide that it was too hard for them to vote for the lesser of two evils. Now we have the worst evil.
I want to make sure that we have time for questions. So I'm going to ask you one
Yeah.
more and then we'll open it up. And that is, if you do get elected, what happens to the gallery?
I mean, I have a director, that I really trust that is continuing to run it. And it's a good question. I haven't really thought that. I mean, again, it's like it's all speculative thinking at this point. And I will say that the gallery has always been, at its heart and soul, um, something that is resilient. It's always driven by its ideological pursuits, right? And it always, Various Small Fires has always been about these bigger ideas. And if I can take these bigger ideas onto a national stage and create reform and opportunities that are much bigger than what the gallery represents right now, I think the calling is there to do it.
Well, thank you so much for your time. We
Yeah.
are going to turn it over to questions.
Hello. So I just want to start with the first one, which is from Brandon. And he's put a message into the chat. My parents are also Korean refugees. I'm also a small business owner who employs real people and is active in the community. And I just want to say thank you for doing what you're doing and giving this talk. You have truly earned a lifelong fan in me. So the first question that we're going to jump into is, are you working with any artists in your campaign?
Yeah. So I've started slowly. Wendy Park made our campaign sweatshirts, which you can get on the website. They're amazing. It is not your typical campaign sweatshirt. Jill Magid did a piece for the gallery that platformed me as a politician, and the campaign has received that as a donation. The platform itself. So the platform is going to travel to different locations throughout the campaign for my town halls. And so, yes.
Brilliant. And then the next question is, looking ahead, what gives you the most hope both in terms of US political landscape and the art world?
Hope is a very dangerous thing in this era because the window of possibility of things, positive things that can happen, keep on getting smaller as time goes on. I think that's a really hard one without sounding cynical. I think we need to wake up. Like, I think people are starting to slowly regain their senses again. I am hopeful that people won't back down in fear because this administration is so dedicated to instilling fear in the opposition. But I'm also hopeful in the next generation. I think that there is the environment is one of my, like, number one lifelong passions to fight for, and that we have a younger generation that I really do believe can make environmentalism a nonpartisan issue.
Wonderful. And then on to the next question, which is, if you were starting a gallery today, what one piece of advice would you give to them to look out for?
Um, Start small, start local, represent people in your community. Don't jump too quickly into international circuit, but also be selective about the art fairs.
Brilliant. And I think that is all the questions that we have. We want to say thank you so much to Esther for her time. I know you're very busy schedule. And Julia, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. I hope everybody's thoroughly enjoyed it as much as I have. I'll try not to Google how to become an MP in the UK as much as I've been inspired to in the last hour. Thank you very much for your time. And if anybody has time, please join us in an hour for our next session. Once again, thank you very much, Esther and Julia, for your time in today's session. And the recording will be available later today for everybody to watch. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.